everyone, and welcome back to The Follow Through. My name is Avery Brenna Crumrine, author of Intention into Action, and today I want to talk about how to write your book in 2 weeks. Because so many people say they want to write a book. You may even want to write a book. A lot of people think about it for years, months. They talk about it with people, they plan it, and they may even have started it, but a lot of the times they don't finish. And it's not because they can't, but they don't actually sit down and follow through with it. And I really want to talk about this today because I wrote my book in 2 weeks. Well, I wrote the manuscript in 2 weeks, and the formatting and the outlining obviously took a lot longer because I was doing it myself. People usually pay people for that. But more recently, one of my clients of my program wrote her full manuscript in 2 weeks as well. 10 chapters completed. And after seeing that happen, it made me realize something so clearly that it wasn't something that I did. It was something that so many more people can do. And I know when you hear 2 weeks, it can sound very unrealistic for a lot of people. And honestly, for most people, it probably is. And even if it's not in 2 weeks, why not 2 months? Why not actually finishing it instead of spending years thinking about it and never publishing anything? Because that's what most people do. And what's funny is the whole idea of me even writing a book didn't come from some big planned out way. I was on a road trip coming back from Northern California after a recognition event for my company I was working for. And we were heading back to San Diego, and I was in the car with my mom and my boyfriend. And my boyfriend ended up saying, if you write a book, I would go door to door and sell it. And I never had thought about a book, and I ended up writing in my notes app, write a book, Dylan will go door to door and sell it. And that was it. There was no plan, there was no outline. It was honestly nothing serious. And a few days later, I looked back at that note. I used my notes as like a to-do list. I write down like any like small ideas that pop in my head, and then I go through it and make sure it's completely empty, like at the end of the week. But a few days later, I looked back at that note, and I had this moment where I was like, why wouldn't I write a book? You know, I had already spoken at the $1 billion impact event. I already knew I had a message. I had experiences that I could talk about. And so it wasn't like I had nothing to say. I just hadn't done it yet. I hadn't even thought about it yet. And a lot of the time, that's really what it comes down to, because it's not about ability and it's not about lack of ideas. It's just a decision. And the second I decided that I was actually going to do it, everything changed. Because in those 2 weeks, I was fully locked into my computer. I was constantly writing. I was getting my thoughts out, no overthinking in it. And honestly, I had so much excitement around it. And it may have been because I wasn't trying to make it perfect. I was just trying to make it something real. And I feel like that's the difference, because a lot of people are trying to write this perfect book, but I was just trying to write a finished one. A lot of people think that to write a book, it has to be amazing. It has to be a certain amount of pages. And it has to be like perfectly planned out and perfectly structured for the chapters and everything. So instead of writing, they're thinking about writing. They're planning it, they're organizing it, and they don't actually sit down and do it. And that's the issue. And after seeing my client do this recently, it really reinforced that for me, because she wrote 10 chapters in 2 weeks, a full manuscript. And this wasn't because she suddenly became this different person, but it was because she followed through. She showed up and she wrote, and she didn't overcomplicate it. She followed the structure, and that's when it like clicked for me that it was repeatable. It wasn't just something that a few people could do. And obviously, yes, 2 weeks is very expedited. But why not 2 months? Why not 1 month? You can at least have your manuscript and then be focusing on outlining, refining it. And something else that I really want to say is I think so many people don't realize the value of writing a book. Because the value isn't just having the book itself. Yes, it's amazing to have your book. Oh my God, your book in your hands. I should have brought this out so much earlier. I literally brought it out because I knew I wanted to talk about my book. This is my book. For those of you who don't know, Intention into Action. But it's about having the book in your hand, but for me, it's what it does for you. Because after I wrote my book, I felt so much clearer in my message. Like, yes, I had spoken before, I had been on stage, and I had all these experiences, but writing it all out really forced me to define what I really want to help people with. And I felt so much more confident getting on stage, being able to do keynotes and speak on what I really wanted to change, what I really wanted to affect people with. Because it wasn't just ideas in my head anymore, it was something real, something I was holding, something I had followed through on. And that's what builds confidence. It's not about thinking about it, it's about doing it. So if you've been thinking about writing a book, I want you to not overthink. I want you to not plan for months. And I just want you to pick like one core message, not like 10 for every chapter, not something for everything you've ever learned. And I want you to just write every day. I put on my calendar like blocks of an hour every single day. And it was like a non negotiable that I was going to at least sit at my computer and try and write. And some days I literally sat at my computer for like 4 hours because I was so motivated. I was so like consumed in like excited and getting all these ideas out. I was so in the momentum. And it's honestly better to not even edit while you're writing because you're not trying to make it perfect when you're writing it out. You can do that afterwards, obviously. But a lot of the time it ends up like making resistance and then you end up slowing down again. And so it's better to just do that at the end once you have all your ideas out on the paper. And I'm even saying all this thinking about people like in my own life. People have had a book on their mind for years and they're still thinking about it. They're still planning it. They're still saying, I'm going to do it, but they haven't done it yet. And at some point, you have to ask yourself, do you actually want to write the book or do you just like the idea of the book? Because if you keep going on to these new book ideas and new this and changing up the idea, then you're never going to actually have this book in your hands. So if you've been thinking about it, stop thinking about it. I really want you to just open a Word or a Google Doc and just start writing on a page. Because intention doesn't change anything, putting it into action does. I'll see you guys next week.